Okay, we're good to go then. We're showing that it's 6 o'clock and time to begin our special city council meeting. We'll start out with roll call.
Cross, Holman,
Yes.
Licio,
Here.
Tabit,
Here.
Olson.
And we're here. So we will go ahead and get started. We will turn it over to our finance director, Mr. Vasenik.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. Give me 1 second. Okay, today we did hold the bond sale for the 2020 bond issue, and this is to finance the North Forest View project as well as the commercial areas of Excelsior Road, Fairview, and Golf Course Drive. Originally, we had set the par amount of the bonds to finance those projects at a little over $6 million. Because of the favorable results we received, as well as a premium on those bonds that were sold. And then in addition to that, we also had some additional prepaids that came in after we initially sized the bond issue. We're able to lower that bond issue to a little over $5.7 million. And that's important because it reduces the amount of debt on our balance sheet, as well as we were able to shave off a little bit more of the true interest cost on those bonds by doing that. It was a very competitive bid. We did have 6 bidders ultimately today, which was a little bit more than last week. We had reported that there were 4 that were at least interested in bidding. 2 additionals bid today. Very light in the market, I guess, today. Leading up to the election, a lot of municipalities did issue bonds, I think, just with the uncertainty of the election. There were about $20 billion in the market back then. And then the week before that, it was, before the election, it was only 11 billion. So a little bit of a run up, I think, happened before the election. This week, with the short week with the holiday, actually probably worked a little bit in our favor. There actually are only $1.4 billion of municipalities or issuers going to the market this week. And of those, that 1.4 billion, only about 200 million was actually a competitive sale. The rest of that was negotiated already out. So a lot of actual Minnesota issuers today. So I think that probably put a little bit more spotlight on Minnesota in the national market, I guess, in selling today. So that probably actually worked a little bit to our favor too. We had an earlier sale at 10 o'clock than probably some of the other issuers did too. But in the end, we did, as I said, had 6 bidders, and it was a pretty tight bids between 1.15% and 1.53% on the 15-year bond issue. And then, as I mentioned, with that restructuring, with the premiums and additional prepaid assessments, and how we restructured that, we were able to shave off an additional 4 basis points, or about 0.04% off that interest rate. And so in the end, we were able to achieve a true interest cost of 1.1%. That's the lowest I've seen in my 20 years. I think that's pretty remarkable on a 15-year issue. So that results in an interest rate on those assessments of 2.61%. And if you recall, when we were holding the public hearings and the final assessment hearing earlier this spring, we had estimated interest rate based on the market with some additional cushion for timing at about 4.5%. So we're certainly well over a third lower than that 4.5% that we originally projected. So what that does, I guess, is in the second to last bullet, you can kind of see that results in about almost a $200 annual savings on those payments for that $16,200 Forest View assessment. And that is based on the fact that we were using a 4.5% interest rate. That was based on a 20-year term, though. And if you recall, we also did modify that after we did the original assessments from a 15-year to a 20-year term. So the total savings to an individual property owner with that assessment over the life of that repayment is close to $4,000. So results that we saw there.
Good.
In addition to that, Moody's did reaffirm our AAA, or excuse me, no, I wish it was a AAA, our AA3 rating for the city of Baxter, and cited some of the strengths and weaknesses. And as I mentioned, I guess in the weekly report and in the past, it really is tying back to the fact that we have strong reserves that are kind of offsetting that average debt per capita that is higher, partially because of our small population base and in the amount of debt we certainly have outstanding. Even though a lot of that is assessment based, they still look at it from the perspective that if that isn't paid back by the property tax owner holders with their assessments, the city would be on the hook paying that back through the property tax levy. So still very overall really good for a city our size to have a AA3 rating, and that's just something we'll have to kind of keep an eye on a little bit as we move forward. But overall good results. I think good savings to the city as well as to the property owners on their special assessments.
Jerry, I'm assuming that all of the prepaid assessments were paid before the interest started, so there's no.
There were a few, but if you recall, we set that interest rate for the rest of the year at 2.5%, so that was fixed. We will go back now certainly, and any assessments that are outstanding or partial assessments, we'll recertify those at that revised interest rate to the county. We have to do that by November 30th, so in the next week or so, I'll be working on getting all those records of assessment updated so that we meet that timeline with the county.
I guess what I was wondering is if anybody that prepaid, and if they prepaid after the fact, I'm assuming they didn't pay out. If they prepaid, they were prepaying because they didn't want to pay any interest.
Right.
So we don't owe anybody rebates, is what I'm saying.
That and the fact that if you recall, we fixed the interest rate for the rest of 2020 at 2.5%. So we certainly are below that amount that we fixed. So yeah, there wouldn't be any adjustments on those prepayments that were made, even if they were paid after the 30 days.
Council questions, comments?
Well done.
It's great news.
Mhm.
Great news. Nice to people get a little good news here before the holidays. So that'll be great.
Makes me think we should have had larger projects in the queue.
I was worried you were going to say that. We still have to pay those bonds back though, so we still have to have the money to pay them back. But yeah, the interest rates are historically low right now. And
would you just like to mute yourself there?
I think only DeBoer has the control of that button.
So, do you want to go ahead with the a motion on this resolution right now, Jeremy? Or?
Yeah, if you would please, since this is a special meeting, resolution 67 is to award the bond sale to the lowest responsible bidder, and that was Piper. So we're recommending doing that. I know it was a little bit late notice, but our bond counsel did update the resolution with the results of the sale and the final results, but it filled in the blanks, I guess, that were missing before we had the sale results.
Okay, we'll take them one at a time. Somebody want to make a motion on the 067 resolution?
Tony will make a motion.
Motion by Licio,
Second, Todd.
second by Holman. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Holman,
Yes.
Licio,
Yes.
Tabit,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes. Yeah, and then B, you're looking for that one too? Set the final.
Right.
Okay,
And resolution 68 is to adopt the final assessment interest rate, and we'll certify those to Crow Wing County for collection beginning next year, and that's at the assessment interest rate of 2.61%.
everybody understands that motion? Look for a motion maker.
So moved.
Motion by, was that Zach?
Yes.
Okay, motion by Tabit,
Second by Lucio.
by Alessio. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Holman,
Yes.
Licio,
Yes.
Tabit,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes. Those two motions pass, and we've got a bond sale. Lots of good news there. Okay, moving on to C, budget update.
Right screen here. All right, you're on a council, I guess, included in your packet an update on the governmental funds. As I mentioned, we did do a little bit of adjustments. We had some things that we had to tweak a little bit. One of them having to do with the software, and that kind of across various departments. And for our Adobe software, we previously used the League of Minnesota Cities as a resource for that. They didn't have that bid this year, so we actually saw with our 2020 acquisition of the subscription for the year was a little bit higher, about $100 or $200 in each department. So we flowed through that change, I guess, as a result of that. And that pretty much was offset by the fact that there wasn't any increase in the dental insurance. That pretty much offset that. We saw that earlier the year. We thought we had about a 2% increase, and Delta Dental was going through kind of a software change and ultimately decided that they weren't going to have an increase in the premium. So we flowed through that change as well. In addition to that, I flowed through, I guess, any adjustments that we knew from a demographic situation where an employee wasn't taking health insurance or changing coverage based on what we had done in the preliminary levy. So those adjustments were made as well to offset that part of it. In addition to that, I did update the debt service levy information, and that's on the last page in the packet for the governmental funds here, and the sales tax collections portion of it. Based on
My apology for interrupting. Could you zoom in on that for us?
Yeah. I was going to do that, but he wasn't taking any breaths.
Oh, he didn't take a breath.
No.
There, perfect. Thank
There
you.
you go. So we flowed those through, I guess. So in addition to that, I just wanted to provide a little bit. We can certainly talk about any of that stuff if you have any specific questions on it. But otherwise, I did want to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit more about the property tax levy and the tax capacity rate that the county did share with us, the preliminary tax capacity rate last week. I still don't have the rest of the jurisdictions one, so I'll continue to work with the county to get that for the school district and the county so that we can kind of see what that overall impact is to the property taxpayer on their overall bill as part of the public information meeting, or what was formerly Truth and Taxation, that's scheduled for next Monday. But enclosed here, I guess, just to kind of quickly kind of show you a little bit, some of this stuff hasn't really changed, but just looking at a comparison of the 2020 approved property tax levy compared to where we're looking for the 21 preliminary. We have a 21 preliminary levy of $7,256,500, which is about a $377,000 roughly increase overall from the current 2020 levy portion of that. And then within that debt service levy that's been flat at $1,076,000 for the last 5 or so years, you can kind of see the 5 bond issues that are made up of that, including the 2013, 15, 18, 19, and now most recently the 2020 series that we just approved tonight, comprised of that $1,076,000 of that levy. And here's just kind of a graph that kind of shows that. The gray bar, or the gray area, is the debt service levy. As I mentioned, that's been fairly flat at the $1,076,000. And then you look at the green, or the blue area, excuse me, the operating levy, that's what's been increasing a little bit each year. Comprised overall shows about a 5.5% increase overall. But with that operating levy portion only, it's a little bit more than that. But when we factor in the fact that there's no increase in the debt service portion, it flattens that out a little bit more at the 5.5% increase overall from last year. So then just kind of looking at a little bit of the calculation of the levy and the tax capacity rate that's associated with that. We have general fund expenditures of a little over $6.7 million. And then of that, we have non-levy revenue, of about 1.1 million, which requires for the general fund specifically a $5.6 million property tax levy. In addition to that, we're proposing to levy about a little over $500,000 for other special revenue and capital project funds. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the flat levy for the debt service of $1,076,000, which results in the total net levy of $7.2 million. The county did, as I mentioned, provide us with a preliminary tax capacity rate for next year. That rate is 56.744%. Last year, or excuse me, for the current year for 2020, that's at a little over 55%. And so we're looking at about a 1% change in that tax capacity rate overall, from about almost 56% to almost 57%. That will be subject to change a little bit as the county works through their numbers, final numbers with any appeals that they may have had earlier in the year when it comes to the valuation of the properties or any adjustments that they make to some of the existing valuations as well. So then if you typically we've kind of shown a little bit about how that impacts the average taxpayer. So first of all, about looking at kind of if there's no change in that valuation, looking at 3 different valuation of residential properties. We have a $76,000 home, and that's just based on where the market value homestead credit fully is achieved by a property. And then from that point, as the property increases in value, that credit that's provided by the state on the value of that home starts to decrease, eventually phasing out. And then more of the median value home in the city of Baxter at the $175,000 level. In addition to that, a little bit higher priced valued home at $250,000. And then finally, just a really small commercial property valuation at $500,000. You can kind of see on the table here the various taxes that were city taxes attributable to those 4 classifications and valuations in 2020, and then what they're projected to look like for 2021 based on that 57% tax capacity preliminary rate. So for that modest price home at $76,000, the increase is about $5 on the city taxes and about $15 on that median priced $175,000 home. And this is assuming that there's no valuation change, which we know there are valuation changes in existing valuation on properties. And it's really specific to, each property is going to have a different number. We're just using kind of an average when we talk in the next table here about how that valuation, average valuation change impacts the tax bill for a property owner. And then at that $250,000 level, we're seeing about a $23 increase in the city's portion of their taxes. For a small commercial valuation of $500,000, it's about an $89 increase in the city portion of the taxes from 2020 to 2021. So then the next table here just kind of looks at that more from the perspective, if you do factor in that there is an increase occurring, I guess, in existing valuations. And again, this is just based on an average increase. We don't have specifics for each property because each property is going to be different in how much their valuation changes from their property compared to, say, their neighbor's property. But on average, we saw about a 3.5% increase in existing residential valuations occurring. And for the first time in a long time, about a 9% increase in commercial and industrial valuations, where we typically saw CI property valuations decreasing quite a bit since the last recession, but saw a little bit of an increase, I guess, for 2021's payable based on the 2020 valuation as of January 1st. But so if you apply kind of those average increases across the board, that $76,000 home, assuming it's now worth closer to $79,000, their tax increase would be about $21 for the year. And then that median priced home that was valued at $175,000, say it increases by about $6,000 or so to $181,000. Their portion of their tax bill with the city would increase about $53 for the year. Similarly, for a $250,000 residential property that's increasing to about $259,000, their tax portion of the city's portion of the taxes would increase about $77. For that smaller commercial property that was valued at about $500,000 and is now valued at about $544,000, their city portion of their tax bill would increase by about $600 from the current year. So I just wanted to provide, I guess, a little bit more context, I guess, to that, given the fact that we have kind of the preliminary tax capacity rates from the county. And like I said, that will be subject to a little bit of an adjustment probably between now and when they do the final certification early next spring, which would be based on any adjustments that they make due to tax court appeals or any adjustments that they make, including some homestead properties that may not have been homesteaded initially when they prepared this. As far as next steps, I guess, we're still working through kind of the enterprise fund budget. So we'll continue to work on that. That statutorily isn't required to be completed, I guess, by a certain date. Next week, we do have the public information meeting, or what was formerly Truth in Taxation, with the public at Monday at 6 p.m. So we'll go through the governmental funds budgets at that point, and then we'll continue to work through the enterprise funds budgets, I guess, in the next few weeks here as well. And if it takes longer, there are some unknowns, I guess, right now that we're kind of struggling to get our arms around a little bit too. And some of that has to do with the wastewater and some of BPU's plans for next year, as well as we know where there's some issues too with our own water treatment plant and just how we structure those rates, I guess, accordingly. But we'll work through those things and kind of look at we'll be moving the adoption of at least the governmental funds budget to the December 15th meeting. So that gives us a little bit more time to kind of talk about those things if we need to between now and then.
Okay. Council questions, comments?
So Jeremy, are we looking at anything from the capital improvement plan for projects next in 21 or not at all?
We're still kind of working through that as well. I know we have some feasibility studies that are underway on those things with consultants right now. I know we met with on the one project, I think this last month, and we're scheduled to kind of come back on that with regard to the Inglewood Railroad Crossing project too. And I believe the other 2021 project with in the commercial area is currently being done as well. That feasibility study was awarded. So updating those things as well. So we'll update those as we have them, but I don't have any additional information at this point on those
But we won't
projects.
be seeing a 3-year CIP by year end. Is that what you're saying?
We'd like to do that. I recognize too that I have some limitations right now in getting some of these things done. But right now I'm trying to get through the budget part of it and the assessment certification. But we'll continue to work through that, I guess, to the degree that we can and see what we can bring you, I guess, by the 15th. But I guess I'm not sure where we'll be at by then at this point.
But I just a follow-up question. Do those proposals or plans require us to be looking at financial contributions at this point, or is that a future budget, or I don't know if you're following me on that, or?
As far as the timing of when we would contribute towards those, they would be future budgets, yeah.
Okay.
With the exception, I guess, if whatever we're looking at doing in 2021, I guess, would have an impact, I guess, on next year's, potentially on next year's budget, as well as the bond issue, I guess, that we would do next year, but we would structure that accordingly.
But our budget will be finalized on the 30th, right?
The governmental funds budget will be finalized to the degree that, I guess, we normally issue debt, I guess, for projects. That's usually built in future years. So it's not necessarily in the current year that we're paying for those costs. So similar to what we did with the 2020 project here, we've levied some money for 2021 to help start paying back those project costs that were done this year. So it's typically a year lag there for those, yes.
Okay. Anybody else? I just got 3 comments here, I guess. So basically, if I'm understanding, the changes that you made today did not change anything from the 5.5% that we talked about in September. The budget part has not changed, correct?
Right. The levy is still the same amount, yes.
And then on the meeting on the 30th, we will, depending on the crowd size and whatever, we will go through the whole budget, right?
The governmental funds, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then my last comment is, I think I talked to Brad a little bit about this earlier too. Never know what we're going to have for crowd participation, and just so we're set and we're ready to accommodate that. If there's, I know nothing about the technology, so I just plan to sit at my table here and eat Hostess ding dongs while it's going on. So as long as somebody else knows how to get all those people in and whatnot. So we're prepared, I guess, is what I'm saying, technically speaking. Okay, is there anything else?
That's all I have for this evening.
City Administrator, anything else?
There is nothing else, Mayor.
Okay. Well, let's see, this is it then, I guess, before Thanksgiving. So enjoy your time with your family, however that works out for you. Be safe, be careful, and because we need you here for the budget meeting, so. On the 30th. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Connie will make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Licio,
Second. Todd.
second by Holman. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Holman,
Yes.
Licio,
Yes.
Tabit,
Yes.
and Olson.